Back to One is sponsored by El Planeta, the hilariously meta tale about a mom and daughter who bluff and grift to fund their extravagant daily life, with impending eviction constantly looming. Starring artist-turned-filmmaker Amalia Ullman and her real-life mother, Ale Ullman. An official selection of the 2021 Sundance Film Festival, the playlist called El Planeta, a profound debut, the announcement of a major comedic talent. Opening theatrically at the IFC Center in New York City on September 24th and nationwide and on digital October 8th. For tickets, visit ifccenter.com.
Why do you care about Jake LaMotta by the end? Why does it break your heart? What happens to him? And it's because I felt like it's because, and this was what I wanted to get in this character, was that he wants to die as much or more than the audience wants him to.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Alessandro Nivola is an actor. He plays Dickie Moltisanti in The Many Saints of Newark. I sat down with him at his home in Brooklyn to talk about the work.
The last time you were on this show was 2 weeks after you got the part, and only 1 day after it was announced.
Wow.
So you told me on the recording, that's how I knew that you, and I was like, whoa, we're making news here.
I was trying to remember when we had met. I knew it was around Disobedience, right?
Yeah.
Disobedience
but much
coming
later.
Out,
I mean, it was a couple of days after you won the
BIFA. Right. So that was exactly right. That was the end of 2018. End of 2018.
3 years almost.
Yeah. If that gives you any sense of the war of attrition almost I've been involved in since getting cast in this role. So, I'll be lucky if I'm not in a walker walking down the red carpet by the time the thing opens.
You were talking about how the first thing you did was you bought, so you were already in kind of preparation mode at the very beginning. Like the first thing you did was you bought this book called Made Men.
Okay, yeah. That was it. Yeah, I didn't even remember that one.
You were excited about...
a lot of other books. But,
right. You were excited about this 4 or 5 month period that you were going to have finally, like all this time.
Yeah.
And you ran into David Chase over there at Thanksgiving.
Oh, right next door. Yeah.
Okay, I'm refreshing you because this is fascinating because you were hoping that he would take you around Newark and show you the guys, and he's like, I don't know anybody. He didn't know it, and so you're like
asking me.
Yeah. So your basic thing was, I'm on my own with that aspect. So I want you to like take us from there. Like you're in the very beginning of preparation.
Yeah.
And you have time.
Yeah. I mean, it was, that rare luxury of being cast 6 months before the movie, which I think I've said to you before, is not the norm with me. It's usually like a week before when some other guy drops out.
Right.
And,
right.
They come to you and tell you to like, get in the costume that the other guy left in his trailer and get to set.
Hopefully you're the same size. Yeah, that's why they cast you, right?
That probably plays into it. The only other time I've had this much lead in was Disobedience, and in both cases, like I consider these two performances, I guess I think of them as my best, and probably because of that. And so I was just really happy to have that time. David, the only thing David said to me when I was just starting to think about the role was, don't pay any attention to anything anyone's said about your character on the series because they're all liars. And
that's great.
It was kind of a liberating thing for him to say, because I felt that I had total freedom to invent the character from my imagination and from what I was going to observe, and I didn't have to feel some kind of onus to satisfy something that had been said about him on the show. And it's true. I mean, the characters you talk about him on the show didn't really know him.
Right.
Chrissy, because he was Michael Imperioli's character, because he was a baby when I died, and Tony, because I never really revealed to him my what was going on inside of me, which was total chaos and emotional unraveling, even as I was projecting to him and the rest of the world this facade of charisma and ease and control, and so I really had a kind of blank sheet of paper in front of me. I mean, there were certain things in the script, obviously, that I was, that made my eyes open immediately on reading it. And the first one being that the thing that I felt was different than all the other mob characters that I'd seen in movies was that all of his violence are crimes of passion. And
That's interesting.
they all come out of these like momentary bursts of emotion.
Yeah.
And they're usually directed towards people that he already has a complicated personal history with, as opposed to like a cold, calculated mob hit that's sort of business related. And so I started to see this guy as somebody who has this Jekyll and Hyde thing going, where he has these violent outbursts that he can't control. He's the product of an abusive family. His dad beat him up. He watched his dad beat his mom up, and it's just David thinks of your childhood as your fate, and there's that feeling that this is something that nothing he does to try and evade it will work. So that was looming large in my head. But those are kind of big philosophical ideas, and really the where I was going to start from was in detail of behavior and voice and just filling in the whole world that I would have been living in, and the time, the place, and my relationships. So I think we've talked about this the last time, but the voice stuff is just it's a huge deal for me, and it always is it's a place where I start with almost every character, just because it affects the whole rest of me. And I worked with a dialect coach for the whole 6 months, and we would get together 3 times a week read through the whole script each time, maybe 3 times. And the challenge here was that everybody has like an impersonation of a Italian mob guy. Everybody's got the fucking Goomba guy, voices, and it's like SNL, or the line between some kind of caricature and a real person is very fine. And when you meet people from the world of these characters, it's often hard to figure out who's imitating whom, whether it's the movies, whether they're imitating the movies or the movies are imitating them.
At this point, yes.
And and so I really wanted to find, while honoring the place and the time, I wanted to find something about the voice that was going to sound unique. And so what I've come to understand with this accent work, dialect work, is that it can serve 2 functions. One is finding the details of the voice, and those are character things, whether he's somebody who enunciates his words carefully, or whether they tumble out of his mouth or are lied together, where my tongue sits in my mouth, how that affects my face and how it makes me feel, all those things. But then on the other hand, it's just an excuse to read through the script 100 million times and experiment with different rhythms of scenes and playing the scenes differently each time in a totally safe environment. We were just sitting right here in my kitchen, and just the two of us, and we would, by the time I came to filming, I'd read through this script a million different ways, and I could have rattled the whole thing off to you word for word like a play. And I used to be wary of learning my lines too well because I thought it would force me into some kind of rote way of saying it again and again and again. But after 3 times of working with Robert De Niro, I noticed, among many other things about him, that that no one I'd ever worked with knew his lines as well as he did. And he knew them months before we started. And so I thought, well, this is like the freest, loosest actor I've ever worked with. He never does it the same twice. There must be something to it. And so I since then, I've always really prioritized learning the script. But then this is a great way to do it because you're not sitting down just covering the next line over with your hand. You're playing around with the scenes and trying different things and just seeing how it feels, and it all kind of happens unconsciously. Yeah. So that was a big part of it, and then there's a million other things.
Yeah, but wait, before you move on to the other things, because this is fascinating, because I had an actor on recently who opened my eyes to something that has to do with this that I never thought about, and he's a gay actor who is frustrated right now because he's getting these roles that the scripter is gay. And so he does a tape and they're like, can it be a little more gay? So now, or can you tone down the gay? The point is that he now doesn't know how to gauge what a heteronormative person thinks of when they want gay, right? So he's getting frustrated. But it's a similar thing, I think, for this, which is like Italian, mafia, right? You can have a choice that you're working on here and have a thing like you want to avoid this, you want to make it organic, you want it to come from this. But were you worried that the people that are going to make this, that are going to be the decision makers, when they hear this that you've been working on for a while, are going to be thinking, oh, I was thinking he was much more, Goomba, or you know what I mean? Like, is that a worry that starts to pop in at a certain point? Like, it's not just your choices necessarily in this kind of thing.
Well, one of the things that actually I felt was, fortunate for me with this role was that it was set in a different period than The Sopranos, and that with that came like a kind of a whole set of different behavioral things, and I was not going to be asked to be impersonating Tony. This was clearly a different kind of person from a different era, and David was, I think, very deliberate about that, and so it kind of it freed me from feeling that I had to kind of be imitating what was on the show, which is a lot of what you're describing. And when you start going into the earlier eras, you get into, I don't know, stuff, Goodfellas and Godfathers and Raging Bulls. And if you watch those movies, like, you don't see that same kind of modern, big sloppy, kind of presentation that you see in the kind of more contemporary renditions of those guys. But again, like with everything, it's just all in how specific you can get and how detailed you can get with it being this particular person, and what is it that's particular about him, how, what is his exact experience, what was his relationship with his dad like, how did his dad beat him up, what did he see his dad do to his mom, all the kind of every little detail is what edges you further and further away from stuff you've seen before, because everybody is different.
And you felt like they were going to honor your choice in this matter, like, because you're building this guy out.
Yeah, I mean, I had conversations with Alan Taylor, the director, over those months. We would get together and have lunch every so often and just check in and kind of talk. But our conversations were more theoretical about, you know, we would talk about the relationships between the characters and stuff, but it wasn't like I was kind of acting out the role in some way. So it wasn't really until I arrived on set day one when he was really going to see it. I mean, I auditioned for the thing. And
you have to feel like
and I auditioned with
they bought this.
5 of the biggest, you know, most dramatic scenes in the movie. So it wasn't like they hadn't seen a version of, you know, a first kind of swing at what the role would be. And you know, nowadays, when I have to audition for something, I treat it as if I go about it the same way that I would if I were starting to prepare for a film I was in. And I had a couple of weeks, and I really spent that time beginning. My research really began then. So by the time I even taped those first scenes, I had a hit on a guy. I mean, it evolved from that point. If you watched my audition tape, you know, I felt like excited about what I'd done, and I sent it in feeling confident that it might go somewhere. You sometimes get that feeling after doing those tapes, and usually it leads to nothing. I mean, I remember Ethan Hawke, who lives down the road here, came over after I'd sent that tape in, and I said, "Hey, can I show you this tape that I just sent in? Like, I think it might be pretty good, you know." And he was like, "Let me watch it." And he watched it, and he was like, "Wow, that's really good. You're never gonna get it."
Yeah, that makes so much sense. It's not just funny. It makes sense.
And you know, well, which, you know, he was just responding to. We have an ongoing joke about like the sort of twists and turns of my career and the 12 movies that I've starred in that never got released, and like, you know, we just like, you know, it's become a kind of laughing matter between us. But but so. Yeah, so they had seen a kind of version of it, but it by the time we started filming, it had moved far away from what was on that tape. And in fact, like even like my accent and my voice and stuff was really altered from what I'd first done.
Besides like physical stuff, besides obvious things like lines and every technical aspect, what did you need to have down before day one for this guy?
Well, I mean, there isn't just one thing. I mean, I did a lot of reading. There was I read a bunch of Gay Talese things. There was he wrote this amazing tome on the Bonanno family, the relationship between the mob boss and his son. Called Honor Thy Father. And
I love Gay Talese. Wait, can I just say he's the last guy I shook hands with before the pandemic?
You're kidding me.
I saw him at Smith and Wolinski.
How old is he?
Someone took me to Smith and Wolinski, and there's Gay Talese. And I was like, I love him so much. He's like one of my favorite writers.
Is he like in his
He's almost 90. I think he might be 90.
Wow.
And I was like, later on, I almost killed Gay Talese. I mean, like I shook his hand like when the pandemic was raging. We didn't know.
Imagine if you had. That would have sucked.
Yeah, sorry though.
But he wrote that. He wrote this great essay on Frank Sinatra called Frank Sinatra Has a Cold.
Greatest.
I read that. I read a book by Roy DeMeo's son, Al DeMeo. Roy DeMeo is a famous mob hitman, and his son wrote this book about growing up with him not knowing what his dad did for a living, and then the sort of all the anger and confusion that he had once he discovered what a monster his dad was. And it was a fascinating thing. They had a very loving relationship when he was younger. And then, I'd read all these mob guys in the 60s used to read Machiavelli's The Prince. So I read that, and then I read like more modern pop psychology versions of it, like 48 Laws of Power.
I was just gonna say, a power book that was going around for a while.
So there was, I spent a lot of time with, and then that book Made Man, and there was a book about the Carroll Gardens, mob down there, Joey Gallo. So I really I had a kind of. I educated myself just in terms of so that I just knew who all the families were, who all the important characters were. These guys would have known who all those people were and sort of, who the legendary figures were and all the sort of anecdotes and stories about them and everything, just to fill my head up with them and have them in there. And then also just the detail of the descriptions of those characters and the daily lives that they were living and their relationships with their families and stuff was fascinating. I went over to Newark. There was a family friend who's a priest there who was a Sopranos fan and had grown. It was an Italian American guy, grown up in the first ward in North Newark, in the Italian neighborhood. Was one of the last families there, because after the riots that are depicted in the movie, they all sort of had this white flight up north to what they call the Pasta Triangle now. And he took me all around the neighborhood, showed me all the places where I would have lived. There's a museum in the bottom of St. Lucy's Church called the Museum of the Old First Ward, which is like a photographic history of the last century of Italians living in North Newark. And I mean, there's everything from Joe Pesci at 17 playing guitar in a doo-wop band called the Zaniacs. And then apparently they were called the Zaniacs or the Zany Acts. But this was just this treasure trove of photos, not digital stuff, like original frame things on these walls. And
what does this kind of stuff though do for you? Like being in the neighborhood and stuff like that. Like, are you trying to have it come into your pores or something? Is that too weird to say?
Yeah, well, you just want to have specific images in your head about what your daily life would have been like, and how, and then how you would have dressed and how people lived in those clothes of that time, it's not just putting the clothes on that, are cut a certain way and everything, but how casual could people be in a fancy suit? How often did their necktie have to be perfectly done up, or did people were people as kind of easy with that stuff as they are now in a certain way, or in what situations were people very formal, or what was it like if you're outside? I mean, that one of the great things about this period is that there is such a divide between your public presentation and then your how you present yourself at home. And at home was just so kind of sloppy, and all the scenes in Raging Bull are so accurate, your boxer shorts and t-shirts and your fucked up hair, and then out to the rest of the world is this impeccable presentation, and that's such a metaphor for the character as well, who presents to the world this impression of someone who is so easy in his own skin and has so under control and so full of charisma and charm and style, and then inside is unraveling emotionally. And so it was great to be able to have that reflected in the clothes. I mean, there's those scenes with my mistress, with Giuseppina, where I'm I'm there having lunch with her, and I'm just not bothering to get dressed, and my hair's a mess, and I'm just sort of the sort of casual element is just spilling over, and then the next time you see me, I'm just so put together, and that contrast is great. So I wanted to kind of get specific about all those things and looking at all these real pictures of people, not just pictures from movies or whatever. And then I met people. I mean, I found through friends of friends guys who are still in kind of small time fraud, but that's in this world, and whether it's like trading room boiler rooms where they're defrauding old ladies the new or construction stuff still, and I remember them talking about all the different doing impersonations of all the different judges that they'd been up in front of. And then I did a lot of physical stuff. I worked with a trainer who a lot of these guys I found out had been amateur boxers when they were younger, and I wanted to change my body, but not to be this kind of big hefty thing. The 60s was, people didn't look that way. People weren't like hugely overweight like that, and so I didn't want to be this kind of big like oaf of a guy, but I wanted to be a physically imposing presence, and I'm not really. So I wanted to feel like if I hit you that it would hurt, and so I worked on, I changed my body a lot. Like I got a lot stronger, and I didn't want to be big and bulky, but I wanted to be like kind of wiry and quick, and to know that like in the blink of an eye that I could like, very quickly put you out. And
you want somebody to be afraid of you if they came upon you. And
and that if I could project that with my body, then I didn't have to play that, because
that's interesting.
I didn't want to have to be playing like I'm this tough guy. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to be able to play that I'm somebody who's like just comfortable with the situation, because people respect him, because they know that. Like, I mean, part of that's like reputation from like things he's done or whatever. I mean, somebody asked me who I am. I say I'm the guy who one time put out somebody's eye for talking to me like that or something. So you go like, oh, gee. People have obviously heard that he's done that, and so, but I wanted it to convey that physically, and there to be something about my physicality that was like that looked like strong and dangerous, and so all of those things were going on over those 6 months before we started. By the time we started shooting, I've never been more prepared, and I had to also this was all just fortification against my nerves, because this was such a kind of there was so much riding on this thing for me, in the sense of it was just just being aware that it was a kind of career-defining role that I hadn't had after 25 years of being a movie actor, and that not only that I didn't want to be a disappointment, but I mainly just didn't want to be any less good than I felt instinctively I could be, and I didn't want to let myself down that way, and so I was very, very inwardly nervous about it, so that having filled myself with all of this in these months before really helped to kind of keep that at bay.
Were you worried that there was some element that nobody could tell you about? All of your friends that are leading men and all of these things, were you worried there was something that they played with when they starred in things that you never knew about because you were supporting all these years, Although I would have never known it until I started talking to actors, is like there's a different thing. I think he's just, there's a line, there's a scene, but the idea of supporting and carrying have two different things. Like, was there a moment where you were like, I wonder if there is something that has to be injected into this besides all the stuff I'm preparing for, that is going to take this to being that starring thing? I hope the answer is no, because I mean, you did it. It's in there, it's there, but I want the answer to be no, meaning that you didn't have to think about it.
Right. Well, I mean, it's not. Maybe it's not one or the other. What I felt about this role in general that was different than a lot of the other roles that I'd played. What was similar about it to other roles I've played is that it's a character part, even though
that's right.
You know, he may be kind of, you know, a handsome guy and a slick dresser and have a kind of sexuality and stuff. It's still like required all the same kind of character work that I've always done in every job I've done. So that felt similar, and in a way, like I was so grateful to be able to do that in the context of a role where that was commanding the focus of the story. But the big difference, I think, just in terms of like the notion of like a starry role or whatever, is that this was a character that invites the audience to him, whereas a lot of the roles that I've played, you know, these oddball characters or whatever, they are alienating to an audience. They may be funny or enjoyable to watch, but they don't like welcome the audience into their emotional life. And this was a character that like invited the audience in, mainly through those scenes in the prison with Ray, which are the scenes where I'm most vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And where you feel him just grasping, like kind of more and more desperately for some kind of, you know, meaning and a way of understanding his own violence and and feeling increasingly like existentially lost. Mm-hmm. So that kind of felt like maybe the thing about the role that, apart from just, you know, being in cool suits or whatever, was the thing that's the difference between like, you know, a leading role and a supporting one. Even a character like Harry Call in The Conversation, just because, you know, you finally see him like unravel at the end there, it's like, it's something for the audience to care about. And, you know, that was also the challenge of this role, was, you know, to do all these horrible things and not completely lose the, you know, the audience's connection to you. Because I always felt like they don't need to love me; they just have to understand me and care and feel for me, even if they know that I'm a monster. You know. That's why I watched Raging Bull, you know, 3 times a week. Really? Rehearsing. I even had like, I'd recorded little scenes off it that I had on my phone that I would watch in my trailer in between setups and things. And so much of that, of the Jake LaMotta character, was to me just similar philosophically, because he was somebody who just did these just terrible things. They were all totally self-defeating, and couldn't control these violent outbursts, and didn't understand it, didn't have the sophistication to understand how to control those that side of him, and felt like it was almost like unrecognizable part of him. And when it was gone, he was left just kind of like he'd come out of a seizure or something,
like a blackout. You know?
And you know, I was thinking, what is it? Why do you still like this? Why do you still like Jake LaMotta? I mean, why do you not like him? But why do you care about Jake LaMotta by the end? Why does it like break your heart? What happens to him? And it's because I felt like it's because, and this was what I wanted to get in this character, was that he wants to die as much or more than the audience wants him to.
As a New Yorker, I wonder if you could relate to this. I think like people walk out their door, and I think that they're worried they're going to get hurt or die, right? Every day, like there's like that's the energy. But you know, I'm worried I'm going to kill somebody. I mean, there's something happened last week with like somebody almost hit my wife on going through a red light. So if I had to play rage, it would almost be cathartic for me in a way. Like there's a lot of things I don't think I can do as an actor, but rage, oh yeah. But like the rage you have to get to in this is different. Like you talked about it a little bit before. It has to be believable. This is not just violence. This is a rage that's very different, and if it's not believable, it falls apart as a scene. It starts to fall apart probably as a character because it's like, but you hit it, and I'm wondering, like, did you have to reach into something in yourself for that? Is that part of it? How much of this were you thinking about? How much of this did you have to access? Was this a part that you were worried about?
Yeah, that's not something that I was ever worried about. I've always been able to, I've always been able to access that. Maybe unlike you, I probably want to kill
Maybe it's an Italian thing, I hate to say it.
Worryingly, this was not an element of the character that I had to reach for. I could show you, when we're done, I'll show you the audition, which was like my first crack at it. And there's a moment in there that's like, has to kind of convey that. And it was there. Like I didn't have that wasn't something I had to really work hard at. I'd have to like excavate my whole relationship with my parents or something to figure this out. But it's something that like in performance like that I've been able to access pretty easily.
If I played this role and I somehow got to do the schedule, I would want the Ray Liotta jail scenes to be right in the middle of the entire shoot.
Yeah.
It would almost be like an oasis. It would seem like an oasis where you can just be with an actor like that for however many days.
Yeah, so we shot those the very last day. All 4 of them.
And okay. That was going to be my question. When was that? I mean, so you were looking forward to that, right?
Yeah, I was kind of glad that they were there because in a way, those were the scenes that I cared about most, that I was most looking forward to playing. I was excited to work with Ray in that particular role, and I felt like by that time I was just going to have the whole story of the film in me. Yeah. And it would be there for those kind of like scenes which are all about like my failed attempts at a confessional. In the same way as Melfi, I come there to confess and I lie over and over again. Yes. And I just I was looking forward to them, and I just knew that by that time in the shoot, like I would have lived the whole story, and I could be coming into those scenes like, longing for some, reprieve from suffering and not be able to find it really.
And how did you work with Ray? Did you guys do stuff on your own before the shooting, or did you just?
Not at all. No, we talked a little bit about it, but it was really just kind of spontaneous with him. He's very first of all, he's very, very committed actor. Takes acting really seriously, and is very serious about the craft and about the process, and he's definitely like not dilettantish about it or anything. But he also, it's not natural for him to like heal to like every word in a script the way that we had to with David's, and so his whole, like, everything about him is so unpredictable in these scenes in a great way. Like, I mean, I that's really what you want from actors. It can be scary because you just don't know what you're going to get, and so you have to, give yourself over to the chaos of that, and which is really what you have to do with acting at its best anyway. But he was really from moment to moment, you don't know what direction he's going to go, and so it was very spontaneous that way, and exciting, and I felt intimidated by him and awestruck by him in certain ways, and I felt even, like, physically intimidated by him. I felt intimidated by the authenticity of his experience, having grown up in Newark and being closer to the reality of this time and place than any of the rest of us. And so I just leaned into all that in my relationship with him as the character, who I think is frightened of his dad and longing to impress him and please him, and also trying to show him that he's got the goods or whatever. And so those were all sort of things that I just naturally felt in our dynamic that I could allow to exist in the scene.
I mean, speaking of David Chase, I mean, when he's on the set, is it a weird schizophrenic experience for you, where it's like, who's the guy in charge here?
No,
was any of that happening?
No, not at all. I was wondering about that in the months leading up to shooting. I didn't know, obviously television is a whole different kind of hierarchy in the movie making process, where the writer rules supreme, and the writer creator of a television series is a kind of impresario, and the directors are kind of brought in episode by episode and kicked around by him, and even the actors who've been there forever and feel like they know the world and the show better than the director does. And I've never been really a fan of that part of television. I really feel like filmmaking should belong to directors, and in television, the more I generally am drawn to the things that are kind of still more auteur driven, like where they'll do a Cary Fukunaga doing all of True Detective or something, just because it allows it to have like such a distinctive voice and style and visual storytelling style, and as opposed to just being driven by language. So I didn't know how that was going to translate into this situation, and I knew that they'd worked together before, him and Alan, but I was pleasantly surprised when I got to set to discover that I wasn't being directed by anyone but Alan, and from what I could tell, the scenes were being staged and shots were being designed, everything by Alan. And he had, complete sort of control over that set from my experience, and I had a great working rapport with him. So, and David was always there.
That's amazing.
But he was very respectful of Alan.
That's good on him. Yeah,
and
that's
I'm
great.
Sure they were having conversations between the two of them all the time. But David was never like directing my performance or anything like that.
And he was saying in an interview that he was kind of mad that he didn't direct this. I guess it was health reasons and also some other family reasons. But so that's so great to hear.
No, he was very respectful, and that said, I had a great relationship with David, and we, mainly over the humor. I mean, that was, and I knew that we were going to be friends when we were we were shooting that scene with me and my mistress in her apartment where she's feeding me the sausages and you know, I'm in there and we get in that argument and everything. And you know, to me, like, it just, the whole way it looked and the way I just dressed, I just chose to be dressed in just like De Niro in those scenes in Raging Bull when she's cooking him the steak. And so, like, in between takes, I came back to sit in my little chair, and David was there, and I was saying, like, God, you know, I'm loving doing this scene because it's just like I feel like I'm in Raging Bull, and he was like, yeah, and I was like, and then almost like at the same time we said. We just both came out with, don't overcook it. You overcook it, defeats its own purpose. And, like, we both just like cracked up and realized, like, that line, don't overcook the steak. If you overcook it, it defeats its own purpose, was both of our favorite lines in just about any movie. And we've been friends ever since.
You know, you were just saying Ethan Hawke down the street here. I went to his office once to interview him, and I was like, this is right near Alessandro and Emily. And I was like, this is a weird block because because you were talking last time about the Van Pattens that live here.
Yeah, that's their house right there.
And it's like,
I was first. I'm gonna let's just get this straight, okay?
So
I've been here 16 years.
It's weird because I saw this short film when I was about to interview one of the Wolf brothers. And I loved this short film. At the end, it came up Michael Gandolfini. I didn't know it was him.
Oh, in that
This is
movie.
a year ago.
Sam is in that movie too for a second, like swinging a dildo around or something.
That's your son?
Yeah.
I've seen this movie like 3 times, so I know that moment.
He went from that to starring in Noah Baumbach's next movie.
Well, I guess Michael was just like friends with Grace or with
with that, of course, because they were so close with his dad. So.
And so, did you know Michael growing up in the neighborhood, or did you see him? Did you
no,
know
see,
him
they only
this?
moved here like 5 years ago.
Oh.
They were living in Tribeca all through the Sopranos time and Boardwalk time and everything. They moved here like 5 years ago, and but in that time, like, we've just become incredibly close friends. I mean, they're like, I consider them like my closest friends now. So we see them all the time. We have a hole cut between our fences. His daughter's named May and mine's named June, and they're the same age, and they run back and forth. Our next project is we're knocking this fence down and we're getting a huge barrel sauna put in. So we're gonna just sit around in towels and pour water over hot stones, talk about life. No, but it was a crazy coincidence that this thing came along, and after I'd sent in my tape, and I heard that they were excited about me and wanted to meet me. I was going to meet David and Alan, and that was when I finally said to Tim, like, well, what should I expect? And he was like, don't expect David to laugh at your jokes. So I went in like really prepared for him to be a tough nut to crack, which was kind of great because I had no expectations on that meeting. And in fact, it was kind of the opposite. Like we got along right away. I think he was very curious to hear about my Italian-American, family history and the details of that, and that got him excited. And I've said this before, but it was like the first time that like my unsayable name, actually may have gotten me a job, as opposed to prevented me from getting one.
Was Michael having a hard time? I heard he was having a hard time. I guess he must have said that.
I don't know. I don't think he was having a hard time. I think he was feeling, he was just
pressure,
feeling the obvious pressure. And he and I had spent so much time together before we started shooting.
That's what I want to ask you.
Yeah, well, we started meeting up at Junior's Cafe down here in downtown Brooklyn, and we would just sit and talk, and not even about the movie necessarily, and we just kind of got to know each other, and then we would like get together and watch Dirty Harry together and stuff, because there's like a line that we say to each other out of that movie and the thing where I'm like, you know, are you feeling lucky today or something? Do you punk? Or there's something that we do in the movie, and I think we kind of bonded over the fact that we both felt this sort of weight of how important this kind of these two roles were for each of us in very different ways. Him because of the provenance of it with his dad, and the iconic character that his dad had created, and me because of it being a breakthrough role in a kind of late blooming moment in my career, and both of us not wanting to squander the opportunity or to let ourselves down or other people down, and so I think we kind of like cleaved together because of that, and so by the time we started shooting, I really felt like a real kind of filial affection towards him, and
that helps,
which was
the movie.
important. Well, David's so unsentimental that he doesn't write. He would never write these two characters talking about how they feel about each other, and so you have to just kind of sense that, and then we could play against it and be kind of like, macho together and give each other a hard time, and you just sort of have it just has to exist there, that kind of ease with each other and physical affection, and and I love him. I mean, he's just like he's an incredibly like sensitive, sweet, funny, open, very humble, like so kind of. He was looking, looking to me for advice and things, and and I'm going like, "What are you talking about?" I mean, like just from your bloodline, you know more about this whole thing than any of us.
In a David Chase Deadline article, when they finally get to you, here's the line. Alessandro Nivola has been knocking on the door of stardom a while. And I laughed when I saw that. Knocking on the door of stardom a while, as if you're like an up and coming actor or something like it's so interesting. There's people that are gonna feel like that they're gonna watch this movie that never saw you before ever. Then they're gonna be like, oh wait, when they look at it, wait, he's the guy in that. And then there's people in England who are like, stardom, what are you talking about? He's one of our great actors here. But it's interesting though, now of course, with this though, what do you do now? Is this a strange moment where you're like in this gigantic movie and you have to be shooting on this level? Because if you're continuing to shoot on this level, which is fine work, you're doing great work, but you're undershooting now. I mean, is this the kind of talks and thoughts that are going on at this moment?
I've always wanted bigger parts. It's not like I don't want bigger parts. And I want bigger parts with the best directors, and same thing I've always wanted. So I'm still after those, but does it mean like I'm gonna like turn my nose up at supporting roles with good directors? No. I still feel like I want to continue to prioritize the director. It was when I made that decision to make that the number one priority that like everything started to change in my career, and people started actually seeing the movies I was in and taking note of even the supporting work I was doing. And so I think that of course, I hope that this is a success and that it makes it possible for whatever people that I can help finance an independent movie, or that I get signed off on by the execs at whatever studio in the big roles. I've had many years of directors wanting to cast me in things and not being allowed to. That's been kind of just the economics of it, the business of it. That's just the reality. And so it would be great if directors who want to work with me have the license to do it. If that's what this can serve to help, that's wonderful. But I don't feel like I want to miss the opportunity to work with great directors just because it's not the lead role, or I feel like one should follow the great directors.
Alessandro Nivola, thank you so much.
Great to see you again.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.